Mulberry Branch Farm. So today is a little bit different. I'm out here and I'm getting some of my chores done for this morning and kind of prepping for the afternoon. But today we're actually going to go to Hueston Woods to the Maple Festival there. So we figure, why not bring all of you lovely people along with us? Well, while we're there, we expect to learn a little bit about the state park, about the trees, and how they render maple syrup. So I hope you guys come along with us. I hope you enjoy what you see. So let's go, guys. Let's get to Hueston Woods. Going on a tour.
So anybody tell me what kind of tree this is?
Maple tree.
Silver.
Maple tree. There's about 4 in Ohio. This is a particular maple that is ideal for collecting sap to make syrup. Anybody have any ideas?
Sugar maple.
Sugar maple. What is so the sugar maple? Why predominantly this is used for the syrup production is the sap in syrup, or the sap in the tree, is about 2% sugar compared to every other tree, like a silver maple and all the other maples, even the oaks, have about 1% sugar in the sap, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you consider with the sugar maple sap, it takes about 40 gallons of these, so about 41 gallon buckets similar to this to make 1 gallon of syrup. If you used silver maple, for example, you'd be doubling your effort, so about close to 80 gallons. That's why predominantly sugar maple is used. And you can see here, this is called the spile. This gets, we drill about an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then we knock these in to collect. There's veins right underneath the bark. This time of year is when, obviously, when we collect. What happens over the winter, the leaves and the leaves fall off, and all the sap, which is basically the tree's food, comes down to the base of the tree and it's stored over there into the winter. And then when it starts to get warm, so on days like today, I'm surprised a little bit it's not flowing a little bit more. So what you want is freezing at night. So yesterday it was very, very cold, and then today, once it hits about 40, 50 degrees, it really starts to pump. So what it's doing is it's pumping that sap up the tree, and fairly soon it's going to start developing the leaves once it gets up there. Once you start to see leaves at the tops of the trees and buds, the maple syrup collection is over. It'll still have the sap, but once it starts to grow leaves, the sap gets real bitter. So it's a fairly short window of time where we can collect this stuff. If anybody wants to come up, there's a lot of bugs and stuff in here, but if you want to dip your finger in there and look, feel free.
You want to go look?
Not what I would necessarily recommend.
How come you don't put buckets all the way around the tree instead of just two different buckets? Any reason?
Wow.
This is kind of a dirty one. So for about he just had a question of how many buckets. So we usually start tapping trees. We're not. And about 12 inches in diameter would get a bucket. And then the next year, 10 years down the road, for about every 10 inches to 8 inches of additional diameter, you could add another bucket. This guy here, we probably could have done at least one more bucket, I would say. Pretty good size maple tree. This is our first level of filtration. So this just goes up here and makes like a roof similar to your house. Anybody tell me, and this is fairly important, if you go into making this stuff on your own, what would this keep out? Rain. The rain. Bird crap, bugs. Doesn't do that good of a job on bugs. There was plenty of bugs in there, but the rain is the hugely important one. Like I said, it's 98% water, so when we go to cook it and make it syrup, we got to boil 98% of that off. So we don't want to add any more water if we don't have to make it easier.
Will coons get in there?
Yes, sir. I haven't seen a coon, but they definitely could. But fairly regularly. Between this weekend and next weekend, it will happen once. Well, somebody will pop a lid, and there'll be a flying squirrel that'll stick his head up. They'll be flying. They're nocturnal. They'll go in at night, and they'll drink, and they'll kind of get trapped. We'll take the lid off, and he'll come popping out of there. But we've seen squirrels and certainly bugs and stuff like that. And there's certain, as we go down, more levels of filtration that this stuff will go through. tell me, so we've learned 2 trees so far. What was the first one?
Maple syrup tree.
The beech tree. Tell by the flat, smooth surface, very paper-like, and then the sugar maple. How can we identify that this time of year in the Hueston woods? Can anybody tell me? It's got buckets hanging on. The third tree we'll talk about is this one, great big fella, right behind everybody. This is anybody tell me what that is?
A tall tree.
Yeah, it's all around tree.
And it's kind of close. So if you look up, the easy way to identify this guy is that it's almost like a telephone pole. It's extremely straight, and the branches don't start until it's very, very high up. This is a tulip poplar. We talk about this because it's very, very old. I forget the age. We had it aged, and it's hundreds and hundreds of years old. It's a massive tree, one of the bigger ones in the nature preserve here. A tulip poplar. Scientific name, this is 15, 20 years ago, I could tell you all of them. This is one of the only ones I remember. This is Lariandendron tulipifera. I don't know why I remember that one compared to all the other ones, but I do. One very interesting aspect of this guy is that vein that you see. Some of you guys over there won't see it until you cross over. So he came out, it was a guy from Miami University came out and looked at it. And he had 2 explanations. He couldn't tell us exactly what happened. But he said it was either struck by lightning or as it grew, it basically ate another tree. And that's it. So it's kind of interesting. It's really cool. Still very healthy. So this is something the Indians would have used. As you saw, all the metal buckets is what we use now sometimes. This is called a mokuk. So Indians back then, they didn't have, until a little bit later, cast iron, steel, stuff like that. That didn't come along until 1800s, somewhere in there. So they had to use what they had, and they had a lot of wood, more than we got now. So what they did was they would carve this out, very similar to what they would use to make canoes. The tulip poplar there behind you was, for Indians, one of the more commonly used because of how straight it was. They didn't have a lot of the branches to make knots, so they would use that to make canoes. This here, how would you go to heat a bow? So if I put water and let's say a hunk of deer leg in there, what would I have to do to heat this up? Anybody have any ideas? That's exactly right. So what would happen if I just put it on top of a fire?
And burn.
I would catch fire, more than likely. So what they would do, they'd have it on the ground next to a fire, very, very hot, and they'd have a bunch of these smooth rocks that they would generally get from a stream. And probably about 80 years ago, I want to say 1950s, roughly, there was no lake here. It was 4 Mile Creek. So they would have plenty of these. They get flat because of the water going over them, and it makes them smooth, and they're also somewhat cleaner than just grabbing one from the woods. They get them super hot. They place them in the fire with water, and then whatever they were cooking, and they would just constantly be taking rocks and putting it in that water, and when it heated up, and over a very lengthy time, it would start to almost get real boil, like a slow boil. But it was constant effort of work compared to going home, hitting my electric range, hitting a knob, and I got heat. So even compared to what we have now for making syrup, using iron, cast iron, it's certainly more time consuming. So one of the first ways, to my knowledge, and I just talked to the naturalist about this to confirm, there is nothing in a book that says this is how maple syrup was first discovered. So one of the ways that we suspect could have happened was Indians found, an Indian brave would have went out hunting in the morning. When he came home the night before, he took his tomahawk or his axe, whatever, and he stuck it in a tree. And another Indian was cooking the food, had like her mokuk happened to be underneath there, or she saw, like you see out of the spiles, the liquid coming out of that tree. So to carry that's probably a fairly small mokuk there. They would need certainly bigger ones. And to try to carry that to the river to get water, if she saw liquid coming out of the tree that looked like water, there's a possibility that she decided to use that. So she stuck her vessel underneath there and collected it. And then she boiled it later on, put her deer meat in there, and it boiled. And they noticed when they cooked that the meat was considerably sweeter, and that's kind of how it started.
Ooh,
Are you okay?
making a trebuchet or a catapult.
Can I buy some ale?
You sure can.
They said I can buy.
Hold on.
No.
All right, y'all, we're back from Hueston Woods from the Maple Festival. We had a really good time. We had great weather. We got to go with my sister-in-law and my nephew, William, along with Joe and the hubs, Mark. So we got back. We enjoyed it a lot. We learned a whole lot. That was actually my first time on that specific tour. Mark and them got to go last year, so I was really happy to be a part of this one. So if you guys at any point in this video found yourselves liking our bring along on the tour, then go ahead, subscribe. It helps us out a whole lot. If you want to go ahead and drop a like, that'd be great. Let YouTube know that you like us and that other people might like us as well. Drop a comment. We love to hear from you guys. We love to respond and interact with our viewers. So I think that's going to do it for today, guys. Until next time, thanks. Bye.